Peace, family. Y'all know who it is. It's Bakari Lumumba, back once again, the progenitor of the MumbaSpeaks.com, a Black empowerment initiative where we believe we could gain a competitive advantage by always betting on Black. Back once again with another video with a special guest, the man, the myth, the legend, Diallo Kenyatta, fellow Pan-Africanist. Introduce yourself to the people.
Hello, everyone. I'm a revolutionary Pan-Africanist who advocates and organizes for total and permanent Black and planetary liberation.
Wonderful, wonderful. And so we're doing this interview. This is our second time doing an interview. The first interview, we had some technical difficulties, but I think it's important that people understand that Pan-Africanism isn't an obsolete or old school, as they would say, ideology, right? It is an ideology that we believe, of course, is still vibrant, has had some struggles, but still is in the forefront and should be the vanguard of the movement for African liberation at home and abroad. So we're going to jump right in. But before we do, just give people a little bit more detail about yourself, where you're from, where you're currently located, and how they could get in contact with you.
Well, I'm from KC, Missouri. I currently live on the south side of Chicago. I'm not really, I don't be set tripping. I am where I am. I ain't got no love for no territory. No, we behind enemy lines, no matter where we go in the US. So I don't really, I ain't claiming no sets. I ain't, advocating for no particular regions. But I'm here in Chicago. I've been here. I'm approaching 10 years in the city, but every day it feels brand new because Chicago is really dynamic and a lot of fiefdoms, a lot of good things going on, organization-wise, a lot of tragic things going on as well. So it's a very interesting environment to organize and cultivate and raise a family in as well. So, I mean, I don't know. Sorry about the sirens.
It's quite all right. It's quite all right. And as you know, Chicago is known as the second city, and you live on the historic south side of Chicago, which is one of the more famous, of course, African-American communities in the United States. Of course, Harlem being the first, south side Chicago being second, and we can
Bronzeville with the Great Migration. Absolutely. Or the warmth of other suns, and we just, I think in 2019, 2018, we just had the 100-year anniversary of what's called the Great Migration. I had the privilege of being a part of some of those meetings and organizational efforts for the 100-year of the Great Migration, but I had to kind of back away from it because I didn't really like the spin they were putting on it. Black people, it was an ethnic cleansing. It was a violent, brutal expulsion of an African agrarian population into a hostile industrial area for union breaking and exploitation. And it's just so many people act as though Africans in mass left the South because we wanted to pursue opportunity when we were left the South, and there's over $1 trillion worth of wealth that was stolen from Africa just during the Great Migration. And that's why reparations, we don't even have to go back to chattel slavery to justify reparations for African people. We can go back yesterday. We can go back last week. We can go back the last 5 minutes because the atrocities are ongoing. The wealth and the interest generated from exploitation of our people, even in the time of after chattel slavery, is incalculable. But well over $1 trillion worth of land and wealth and interest was stolen from African people during the Great Migration, but we pretend as though it was some triumphant thing in modern era. And I'm not even sure why we feel the need to pretend as though it was a triumphant era in our history.
Absolutely. So we're talking about state-sanctioned terrorism, state-sanctioned violence, state-sanctioned
and genocide. And we've been heard it. I have a great, very wise, my oldest living relative right now, knocking on 90 years old. And she said that when I was very young, she said, Black people are the wildebeest of the world. And she was talking about, she saw a documentary about the wildebeest migration and how the wildebeest would go from one edge of the Serengeti to the next, spanning half the continent, fertilizing the land, churning up the soil. They were very vital to the Earth's to that environmental ecosystem. And the lions, the cheetahs, the crocodile, all the predatory animals would lay in wait for the wildebeest to be herded across the land. And every predatory creature you know, basically their whole ecology is rooted on preying upon this migratory population. And you see African people 100 years ago were literally herded to the north for industrial exploitation. We were locked into the South. We couldn't leave. We were locked into the South for 2 centuries for agricultural exploitation. And now in the so-called new economy of the digital, we're being driven out of the cities again. And Absolutely. We're being driven into the South, like all the majors. Harlem, Compton, New York is no longer majority Black. Harlem is losing its Black population. Here in Chicago, every demographic in the city of Chicago, Asian, white, Polish, Ukrainian, Hispanic, every demographic in the city of Chicago is growing year after year, except for Black. We're losing our Black population and our Black communities, and our hold on the economy and political climate here is weakening every day. And we pretend, and we go on social media and see all these Black people balling out in success, hashtag goals and entrepreneurialism. And it's really a tragic situation when you look at the sum total of the shifting power and economic dynamics.
Absolutely, absolutely. So let's jump right in it. I'm a Pan-Africanist, you are a Pan-Africanist. There's been a litany, a cacophony, I guess for a better way of saying, of individuals and now even organizations of movements, particularly FBA, Foundation of Black Americans, and of course ADOS, African American descendants of slaves, who are arguing that Pan-Africanism is now obsolete, it's irrelevant. What do you say to that?
FBA and ADOS is nothing but prosperity politics. Over the last 20 years, we have encountered what was called the prosperity gospel. And basically in this new epoch of economics, where it has always been, it's called Calvinism. The Calvinistic branch of the Protestant religion equates your material worldly success with your heavenly mandate, meaning that God demonstrates who he loves and who he blesses on earth by giving them abundant material wealth. That's called Calvinism. And so that was also tied to the divine right of kings. The kings had the wealth and the power because they had the favor of God. And those of us who are peasants and serfs should, you know, bow to their authority, because to confront and violate the king is to confront and violate God himself. So this is a long-standing Eurocentric mentality. So anyway, there was a time where, especially in Black Protestantism, Black Christianity, and even Catholicism, that God had a special place in his heart for the poor. God had a special love for the poor. And it was easier for a camel to walk through the eye of a needle than for a rich man to enter the gates of heaven. That was the emphasis you would see in the Black church throughout the United States. Coming into the 1980s and what is called the Reagan era and the era of Reaganomics and neoliberal economics, that it became no longer that you should be ashamed of having grotesque wealth. It used to be wealthy men would pretend to be humble and front like they didn't have it. You know, Rockefeller used to walk the streets. Nelson Rockefeller used to walk the streets as a poor old man, passing out pennies and nickels to the homeless, like, I'm just like you. But in that Reagan era, and I don't know if you know about Gordon Gekko, and there was an old movie about Wall Street where he said greed is good. And greed is natural, and greed is the natural order of things, and we are under natural selection. So long story short, white folks decided to lean into this hyper-consumerism, materialistic element, and Christianity, because Christianity is not driven by some divine force, Christianity is driven by the powerful people in the society, and it serves the powerful people in society. So when Europeans were imperialist, Christianity was overtly racist. And then when Europeans decided to switch up their imperialism and have this desegregation, inclusive Christianity, so Christianity became inclusive. It's all a large manipulation. So when the United States decided to lean fully into, after the capitalists defeated the communists in the Cold War, they say, hey, greed is good, capitalism is the way. TINA, the principle of TINA that was articulated by Margaret Thatcher and other right-wing European leaders, there is no alternative to capitalism. All that culminated into Christianity getting on board with the politics of the era, with the economics of the era, and thus you get prosperity gospel, prosperity ministry, and the birth of the mega churches. So of course, as go massa, so goes his slaves. So African ministers, T.D. Jakes, Creflo Dollar or Klepto Dollar, even Reverend Price on the West Coast, may he rest in peace, Eddie Longstroke, brought what started in amongst the white folks, brought it into the Black community, and you had a good 20 to 30 years of prosperity gospel. But after a while, people grew weary with prosperity gospel. Some people started to articulate, like Reverend Barber with the Poor People's Campaign, that this pursuit of wealth is inconsistent with Christian values and Christian principles. And so prosperity gospel, even though it's still with us, isn't as prominent. And so what happened when prosperity gospel fell out, you had some opportunistic parasites like Yvette, like Tyree, who said, let's take this prosperity gospel that generated billions of dollars, that made storefront preachers into overnight multimillionaires. Mm-hmm. And they said, let's see if we can use prosperity gospel into politics and use some of those ideas and concepts and promises. So under prosperity gospel, they were like, well, if you praise God and you engage God properly, you will get material wealth under capitalism. And so they just turned God into politics. So if you engage the US political climate properly, you will get money. And so they say, hey, we're going to, ADOS and FBA said, we're going to embrace Western capitalism. We're going to embrace American exceptionalism. We're going to embrace all the imperialism and all the shit that we've been fighting for generations. They say, we'll get down with that. We'll be jingoistic. We'll be xenophobic. We'll be separatists. We ain't like, get the Africans out. Don't let them in. Don't give them scholarship. We'll do all that if you pay us. We'll be lapdogs for white imperialism. We'll mimic everything about white folks. We'll become, if you pay us. And that's prosperity politics. And reparations went from repairing African people. Reparations, by definitions, means you restore a people back to the status that they were in prior to the atrocity.
Being done. Right.
And it went from being about ending imperialism, just redistribution of wealth, reuniting the African diaspora with our continent, to being just about a sum amount, just about Black people getting money, buying property, and inflating and getting more and more fiat capitalism, fiat currency to reinvest in the capitalist system. So they are opportunistic, and they're not even good parasites because they're unoriginal. They're extremely unoriginal in that. So that's what, and certain right-wing political bodies, certain capitalistic political interests and economic interests say, wow, this is a divisive ideology. It is an ideology that is dependent on our benevolence and our fiat. So they got a boost from our oppressors. Just like in the civil rights movement, you had integrationists and you had liberationists, and the oppressors, the DuPonts and the other elites decided to back NAACP and the integrationists as opposed to the liberationists. In this era, you have reparations for liberations and reparations for income and consumption. They back that side, divide and conquer. So Absolutely. They have no real legitimacy. They have no real platform, and their plan is not viable.
Very good. Great. I mean, you articulated that very well. You gave a historiographic overview of how we come to this point. And so with that being said, I will, of course, make the assumption that you believe Pan-Africanism still matters. And if Pan-Africanism matters, there are some differences in the Pan-Africanist community. I, of course, am a Pan-African nationalist, someone who follows the ideology of one Marcus Garvey or closely linked to that. But you, of course, are Pan-Africanist socialist. So you lean more along the lines of one of Kwame Nkrumah or a Kwame Ture, also known as Stokely Carmichael. So could you explain for the viewers, what is the difference between a Pan-African socialist or a revolutionary Pan-African socialist and a revolutionary Pan-African nationalist?
Well, nationalist, one of the key ideas that the Pan-African or Black nationalists introduced to the Black struggle for rights and independence and freedom and autonomy was to secure our own territory and having control over our own territory. And embedded with that, from Garvey till now, is the suggestion that African people will have their own sphere of influence that works alongside Western sphere of influence, or white sphere of influence, Arab sphere of influence, the Asian sphere of influence. And within that sphere, we can somewhat control and have certain, in terms of our natural resources, in terms of our population, in terms of defense, in terms of armaments and defense, in terms of signing treaties and negotiations. I think that is rather obsolete, because that's it for Black nationalists. They want Black territory, Black nations. They want the nation, which is the very concept, the flags, the policies, the constitutions, the priorities of a group of people within a defined territory. And they want, that's the nation, and they want the state, the physical apparatus, the physical borders, the resources within those borders, the waterways, the airways. I think that is a rather obsolete way of orienting and organizing population. Now that we live in a world in the nuclear age, in the internet age, in the age of rapid transit, rapid communication, this old thing of, oh, my country 'tis of thee, I think is obsolete. And in a time where nations were the key organizing fulcrum or focus of a population, it would, but we missed that boat. Nuclear fallout does not recognize borders. Climate change, global warming, flooding, ocean acidification does not recognize borders. Increasing pathogens, pandemics don't recognize borders. So if you organize around borders, you still leave yourself extremely vulnerable. Also, we cannot retreat behind the Africa's borders or Africa's shores. We cannot retreat behind defined territory, for Black territory within the United States, and allow our oppressors to continue to burn coal, experiment and do gain of function tests and weaponizing viruses. We cannot allow them to drive animals into mass extinction. We have mass migration, animals that migrate from continent to continent, from territory to territory. And we can't have other nations destroying and killing that biodiversity. So we have to look beyond borders. We even have to look beyond the atmosphere of the Earth. These people are in space, in orbit, creating weapons, literally polluting the orbit, trying to colonize the moon and colonize Mars. They're attempting to go into the Arctic. As the Arctic polar ice caps melt, they have agendas to go in there and set up oil rigs and support. And so you can't hide behind your borders. There was a book that came out 20 plus years ago called Without Sanctuary. And the book was about the history of lynching in the United States, and had a lot of photographs. And that concept hit me very hard, because there was really nowhere for an African to go to escape white hegemony, white aggression. And now that was just within the confines of the United States. Now there is no sanctuary within the planet. There's no we can't, even if we develop technology to colonize the moon and the Mars, there is no sanctuary for us. So I believe that socialism that seeks to destroy these hierarchies, seeks to destroy these industries, these polluting, earth-killing industries, are the only way to go. I do not think we can retreat behind borders and build up behind borders. Build that wall. You even have Black people who supported Trump about that wall, because it's just too contaminated. I think it is an obsolete way for us to organize ourselves. And that's why I give greater emphasis to ideological unity across borders than I do to solidarity behind borders.
Okay, interesting take. I would disagree, but but we can have a conversation. So we're going to move forward. So something we do have in common that we're lockstep with, which would really make us maybe a triple minority, right? Particularly in America, in terms of the fact that we are Black, we are men, and then that we are atheists, right? We know that the African-American community, we would argue, unfortunately, is highly religious, and we tend to be very religious and practicing alien religious beliefs, right? Particularly those of the Abrahamic faith of Judaism, Christianity, and Islam. So we tend to in agreement of our Pan-Africanism, take a Pan-African perspective that is reminiscent of Marcus Garvey's ideological son, and that is, of course, is Carlos Cook's, the African Nationalist Pioneer Movement. So could you kind of tell us how you came to atheism and how that influences, of course, your Pan-Africanist activism?
Absolutely. Well, first, I would have to maybe put an asterisk on the fact that being an atheist makes us a minority.
Okay.
Because most people you encounter will be atheist plus one. If you ask a Christian, does Obatala exist? They would say no. If you ask a Muslim, was Jesus Christ a deity? They would say no. If you ask any person who believes in if you ask a Hindu, about the divinity of Christ or Moses and the tablets, he would be like, you sound crazy. So the only people who are truly believers are pantheists. And a pantheist is a person who believes in a multitude of gods or all gods. If you are a monotheist, you are literally, you believe in you dismiss as many gods as I do. I dismiss 100,000 gods, you dismiss 99,999 gods. So, when you want to break bread with the Muslims, just walk in there and say, can you believe these people believe Jesus was a virgin birth? And they'll be like, yeah, that's crazy, right? So it's always funny to me that people think that you're so crazy to be atheist when they're atheist. The same logic and reasoning that they use to dismiss every religion that's not their own, that the same logic they use not to believe in Thor, not to believe in ISIS, it's the same logic we use not to believe in any of them. But going on, I became an atheist simply because I was a true believer. And I think most atheists.
Now, when you say true believer, what do you mean by that?
I believe that there was God, that there was a God. I believed in the fact that there was a God who created the universe within a week. I believe that he killed his only begotten son at a very young age. I asked Jesus Christ to come in my life, and I acknowledged that God, that Jesus sent God in to forgive my sins. I believed all that shit wholeheartedly. And I read Proverbs and to teach me how to be a proper young man. I was a true blue Christian until I started reading the Bible and reading the Bible and reading the Bible. And I'm like, this is inconsistent. This is absurd. It doesn't work. And I went to the men in my church, because women can't give men wisdom. Women aren't allowed, even boys. So I went to the men, and I began to question them about it. And instead of asking my questions, they told me I shouldn't question. And I was actually around 12, 13 years old, and I was in the children's Sunday school class. And my Sunday school teacher said, because I was asking these questions and taking these positions, that the next Sunday I should go to the men's Bible study class. And I was under the impression that I was being invited to go to the men's Bible study class from the children's or the junior Bible study class, because I was showing such great faith and such great interest in putting such great effort into studying the Bible. So when I walked into the men's class, and two of my uncles were there, my great uncle, my grandmother's little brother, he was the minister. I walk in there to go sit up front to learn and strengthen my faith in the Gospels. With the men, they told me to sit in the back and shut up. And I was being punished because of my inquiries, because of my trying to be a biblical scholar. So that allowed me to basically independently study. Long story short, I found out about how Africans came to be Christians. I found out how Christianity came to be Christianity. I found out how Christianity came to the continent of Africa. Even the Ethiopians, the oldest church, I learned about who the first bishop of Axum was. A white man brought Christianity, and I just learned some doctrinal truths about how the doctrine has evolved. I learned some historical truths about the material impacts of the religion. And then I learned a lot of scientific truths about human evolution, about geology, about theories and confirmed ideas about the formation of the universe, the formation of the planet, the nature of entropy and all this other shit. And I'm like, this Bible is nothing but a brutal, primitive delusion made by brutal, primitive, delusional people. And then, of course, I tried to go to Islam after I left the church.
We all know that that's a lateral move, right? It's not as you go into some type of revolutionary theological frame of reference. It's a lateral move, but many people don't know that because, of course, many people associate Islam with, of course, Malcolm X.
Yeah, and that's what drove me to it. I read the autobiography of Malcolm X while I was in middle school, and I would pick up the Nation of Islam. I stopped eating pork, and then stopped eating beef, and then stopped eating dairy, became a full-on vegan. But then I found out that, you know, the Nation of Islam was a cult, and that they were less tolerant of inquiry and discussion than the Christians were. So then I tried to go to True Islam, which is followed by my older brother, my two older brothers, and my father, who were Muslims. I went to the masjid, and then of course I learned about the Arab slave trade. I learned about the truth about the Prophet Muhammad, his real teaching, the Haditha, and I learned all that. And I'm like, man. And then I went over to African spirituality, you know, Ifa and Yoruba and the Vodun, and I'm like, this is very interesting from a anthropological and cultural point of view, but there is no magic. The ancestors do not intervene on our behalf from some special realm or dimension and all that. So none of these religions hold up to scrutiny. And I abandoned faith and I became evidence-based. Okay. And being evidence-based disallowed, but it wasn't an overnight thing. You know, I was well into my late 20s. And I was long over a decade after I left the church, I still had Christian indoctrination about when I met my wife and my thoughts about the man head of the household and these homosexual agenda and all this kind of shit that I got from my Christian indoctrination. I was well into my late 20s when I was still processing and trying to purge my Christian indoctrinations, even after I said there's no evidence of God and there's no legitimate reason for an African to be praying to Jesus, to Moses, to Yahweh, or to Allah. So it's a process that I'm still working on.
Right, understood. So when we talk about how it influences your Pan-Africanist activism, I always think of Carlos Cook, right? And Carlos Cook kind of took over the Garvey movement after Garvey was deported and later settled in London, England, in the UK. And people wrote to Garvey and said, he's changed the motto of your mission from one God, one aim, one destiny to, if I remember correctly, one goal, one aim, one destiny. And Garvey,
one people, one aim, yeah.
One people, one game. And so, of course, thank you for correcting me.
Well, they're interchangeable, you know. It was 100 years ago, so we could both be right and both be wrong. But you get the point.
It was 100 years ago. And Garvey said, they said you took God out of it. And Garvey said, good job. He told him, good job. He says, if I could go back, that's the one thing I would do differently. Why? Because as we know, when you bring God into it, we start depending on God to do for us what we should be doing for ourselves. And we become delusional and starting to believe in what? Miracles and all of these great works and so on and so forth. Absolutely. When the reality is that's not how the world works. And so if you could kind of talk about how it influences your activism in which you're more pragmatic rather than focusing on what a wishful thinking type of perspective.
Right. Well, yeah, the greatest thing
the hopeism is the opium that of the masses.
Right. The greatest thing that atheism has given to me on a political realm is to be evidence-based and in a perpetual state of questioning and critique. There really people who aren't atheists are confused, where they believe that atheism is just another religion. There's the old fallacy where they say it takes faith to be an atheist. People don't understand that there are no atheist mandates.
Right.
Atheism is simply a conclusion. And it is a conclusion that the assertions made about God have not been demonstrated or they're non-falsifiable, and that they have not been reinforced by anything. And in fact, every assertion about the Bible that has been proven, everything that has ever been attributed to the divine or supernatural, when we do finally get the ultimate answer, we find out that it is not possible, such as divine birth. as we begin to understand human reproduction and the human reproductive system, and we begin to look at, you know, everything from the woman's eggs and fallopian tubes, and we were able to look at a sperm cell under electron microscope, we know that reproduction requires, you know, certain things that, so we essentially disproved the capacity for spontaneous impregnation or virgin birth. When they talked about the splitting of the Red Sea, and archaeologists were able to look at, find the history of that time and decipher the hieroglyphics of that era, there was no Israeli enslavement. There was no army buried at the bottom of the Red Sea. There was no archaeological evidence of the, what they call it, the 40 years in the desert, in the wilderness. There's no evidence of Noah. They measured out the specs of the ark, that the ark was not seaworthy. There's no evidence that there has ever been, no geological evidence that there has ever been a global flood. So there are many things about the Bible that you cannot prove. But the few things that we are able to assert and prove, we find out that that scientific and archaeological evidence always disproves the divine.
Absolutely.
So the divine in many, And
if I could, you know, I always tell people who, of course, grew up under that Christian faith and belief, I did as well, my parents are ministers even to this day, is that, you know, there's a scholarly text entitled The Bible on Earth that goes into the story and how the story of the Exodus was even created during the time of King Josiah to create a national narrative and ethos and collective pride in the people, right? So, which many cultures have done. The Greeks did that, the Romans have done that, and we know that during that time, what many people would call stealing from another culture, that the actual term is forgetting me, is left me right now. But that was something that was quite common during antiquity, where people would borrow bits and pieces of another people's culture and then create that into their own to create their actual origin story.
That happens right now.
Absolutely, absolutely.
We see white people dabbing on the Instagram, you know.
Right. And I think also, I remember, so as you know, I think that we've discussed this before, that I'm an avid weightlifter. I work out on a regular basis. I try to keep the suit on Batman look, right? But at the gym, there's a brother, great brother. He's the older brother. And we were having a conversation, and so we played chess, and of course I gave him that work. You know, I give everybody work on the chessboard. But he said, "Hey, can we have a rematch? And if we do, if I win, can we read some scriptures?" And I said, first off, you ain't gonna win, so that ain't gonna happen. And I said, but you know my position, you know I'm an atheist. And he started talking about the Tower of Babel, the Tower of Babel, right? And how, you know, they were trying to build a skyscraper to the heavens, and this pleased God. And I said, well, one of the issues I have, of course, with Abrahamic faith is the falsification of African history, and of course, the omitting of African history. I said, because during the same time period that you speak of, we had the Great Pyramid. So how can you explain that they had a skyscraper that was the tallest in the world and God was displeased by that? But then you have, of course, the Great Pyramid, which was one of the 7 great wonders of the world, and it's still standing today, and it was never destroyed. If this was an issue that they were trying to reach the cosmos, why is there an International Space Station that's been you know, out and out of space for over 20-something years? So I'm like, you know, at some point you have to make it make sense.
Right. Yeah. Yeah, and when people invite, the thing with both my sons, I've never sheltered them from religious exposure. You know, my sons have never received religious indoctrination, but they have received religious, they have been evangelized. When the Jehovah's Witnesses would come to the door and my son wanted to go out and talk to them about their faith, I've never shielded my sons from, because I knew they were going to live in an environment that was highly religious. So all I did was just give them the ability to engage with people's beliefs and assertions with their own intellect intact. You know, I allowed them, and there's something you'll never find with a religious person. They don't let their children engage with atheists. They don't even let their children talk to other Christians. So if you're Pentecostal, you're not gonna let your child go to a Methodist. Right, or a Baptist. So you're not, if you are a Protestant, you're not gonna go to the Mormon tabernacle. You know, if you Catholic, you're not gonna go let your kid go hang out with the snake handlers, and it ain't because of the snakes. So they know that there's only 2 things that can make someone susceptible to religion: believing in religion. That's indoctrination from childhood, when they're just developing their ability to understand and process thinking, or some great trauma, because going through great trauma also great stress greatly reduces your cognitive ability. And you have so many people, it's like, I was so high and I was at my lowest, and when I found God. That's not a compliment. That's not a compliment to the validity of religion and the arguments of religion. You know, you don't find people saying, I was at my lowest when I got my doctorate. I was at my lowest when I made this grand discovery. Right. You need, people are generally that are able to do that thing have a level of stability, a level of confidence in themselves, a level of support network when they accomplish great things that in the academic, scientific, or in their personal lives. But the reverse comes with religion, because religion is instinctively, inherently, and historically predatory and exploitative. They find people in their worst position. And you also find, whenever it comes to human progress, I don't care if it's welfare programs or single payer healthcare or allowing some new invention or discovery to be openly disseminated against the citizens, religion is always the first to try to suppress it. And I don't care if it's Greek philosophers or modern technology of today, because they know if any level of autonomy and freedom and comfort you give to the masses, it reduces church attendance. It reduces people's belief in the supernatural. You find nations that have the most political stability and economic opportunity have the lowest church attendance. The societies that have the greatest amount of turmoil and disruption and poverty have the highest level of people who believe in the supernatural and have faith and believe in gods and other supernatural entities across the board.
There's always been a saying, if you want to know if you're in a bad neighborhood, just look and see how many churches are on each corner, right? So I understand that completely, 100%. That's something and even myself and my children, I wouldn't shield them. I actually would just have a conversation with them about Jesus and Muhammad and Buddha, and have them read religious texts, have them read books about the history and development of these different religions, and they would all come to the same conclusion. Who people actually believe this stuff?
Yeah,
they're like, what? I'm like, yeah, people do. So I think that's great, but we're kind of running short on time, so we're gonna move forward. And one of the things that you get a lot of pushback from, particularly on social media, is your vociferous critique of the Nation of Islam.
Yes.
And so if you could go into why you critique them so in a harsh manner that you do, and why you call the Nation of Islam, or you see it as a cult.
I critique the Nation of Islam because it is a cult, and I have a saying, I don't know if I'm the first to say it, but I'm the only person I know that said it: cults don't cultivate.
Right.
Cults don't cultivate. So, I don't even know where to start. But basically, the reason that the Nation of Islam is a cult is because it fits the model of a cult. They have behavioral control. They switch up identities. They are rooted in nonsensical, absurdist ideas about the divine. And believe you me, I'm not saying that my argument is not, oh, they're not real Islam. I could care less that they're not real Islam, even though they're not quote unquote real Islam, because the only difference between cults and established religion really is the bank account and the body count. If it's an established religion, it has trillions of dollars and millions of deaths. If it's a cult, it only has a couple of $1 million and only a few hundred deaths. That's it. The bank account and the body count, in a rough way, is the only thing that separates cults and mainstream religions, or what we call world religions. Beyond that, believe my critique of Islam has nothing to do with their failures to adhere to, the Quran, the teachings of Muhammad, the Hadith, and all that, and pilgrimages to Mecca and all that. My critique of Islam is that it is a cult because it fits what is sometimes called the bite model: emotional control, behavioral control, and all the other mechanisms of control and identity transformation, getting you to give up your name, isolating you from non-believers, defining non-believers and non-adherents as the enemy, or so on and so forth. So it fits the model of a cult. I know that makes people uncomfortable, but the Black community is plagued by cults. And the Black community and the Black conscious community even double so. So I call the Nation of Islam because it behaves like a cult. And one of the reasons why I call it out, where I'm not out here talking about the Fahami Temple or talking about as much as the Asar Set Society or Dr. York's groups, you know, because they don't have as much mainstream prominence. Dr. York doesn't get to, you know, sit across from Black dignitaries and go to Africa, the African continent, and be treated like an ambassador or a welcome guest. So the reason I focus on the Nation of Islam is because it's one of the most prominent and cults that has a certain level of legitimacy that other cults don't have. And if the Shechem and the Asar Set cult rose to the prominence of the Nation of Islam, then I call them out too. So it's mainly as you call out because their influence is the greatest, so their potential for harm is also the greatest. Also, the Nation of Islam is tied to the downfall of two of the greatest African people within the last 2 to 3 generations, Malcolm X and Dr. Khalid Muhammad. There's a very prominent photo of Malcolm X looking out the window holding an AK-47, and he's peeking out the curtain. And a lot of people have that poster on their wall. We know KRS-One by all means necessary. You see a lot of hip hop artists mimic that, and everybody loves and sees that photo. And we misinterpret that photo as Malcolm X taking a stance against our oppressors, taking a stance against the Ku Klux Klan, taking a stand against the CIA, FBI, the NYPD. The reason that Malcolm X had that AK-47 and was peeking out the window is because less than 24 hours prior to that photo being taken, the Nation of Islam attempted to firebomb his house. And they tried to throw a Molotov cocktail into his home through the window of where 2 of his daughters were sleeping.
Right.
And he said he was fortunate because the angle that they threw it off, it glanced off the window and landed just outside the house, and it didn't hit anything that was particularly flammable. It fell on the concrete and kind of burned itself out. And that's why Malcolm X, he was looking out the window in fear that he would be further attacked by Black cult members. So that image is not an image of Black resistance. That image is an image of Black resistance to white aggression, Black resistance to racism. That is an image of Black resistance to occult thinking and cult harassment. And I really hate that that history isn't taught. And that picture has been so distorted. I've even been to the home of young men who were members of the Nation of Islam that had that poster or that image on their wall. It is insane. Well, I don't know if they were, no, they were actually Muslim. I'm not sure if they were active members of the Nation of Islam, but you'll see people with, you know, posters up to, so, and the same thing with Khalid Muhammad. Before he passed, he said publicly that the Nation of Islam is harassing me, is hounding me, is threatening me. So how can you have a group that most Black people associate with Black empowerment, Black resistance to the status quo, and you turn around and 2 of the greatest Black African minds and African organizers of the last half century have been undermined and betrayed by this same organization? I think that Nation of Islam's reputation is more about branding and public relations than it is about the concrete work that the Nation of Islam has done for our people. So my only thing is I just try to, I believe in self-exposure. I don't make things up about people. I don't assert things. I simply go off of what other people says. Farrakhan is quoted in saying is that the nation dealt with Malcolm like a nation is supposed to deal with the traitor. And it's none of your business.
Right. And I know that you've also been very critical comments Farrakhan has made regarding child molestation in the home. And if you could speak on that.
Yeah, well, he said the reason that men, he said, I'll use his exact words. He was very careful with his words. He said the reason why men mess with their daughters is because the daughters look like the mothers. And because the mothers get fat, they're rude, and they don't venerate the man. And the daughters replace that role. The daughters look like the mother did when she was young and attractive. The daughters still venerate their fathers. We all know girls love their daddies, and the daughters are enthusiastic about serving the man, giving him his plate, cleaning up after him, preparing his clothes. And he said, that's why men mess with their daughters. And so in order to protect your daughters from the inappropriate gaze of their fathers, the women have to stay physically fit, continue to venerate the father as the Godhead in the home, and to begin to enthusiastically and humbly serve the man.
Now, many people would argue, you're out of your mind, you're just a hater. Louis Farrakhan has been a servant of the Black community for over, what we could dare say, 60, 70 years. And there just is a lot of hateration, holleration in your dancery, right? Many people would argue that the Nation of Islam has one of the best drug rehabilitation programs in the country. They have independent schools, Muhammad University. They have a robust Black weekly known as The Final Call, which was first established by Malcolm X, known as Muhammad Speaks. And so many people would argue, why are you trying to tear another Black man and a Black organization down rather than working with them or lift them up? What would you say to people who would make that argument?
If articulating the facts about you is tearing you down, that's your fault, not mine. It's as simple as that. If I'm simply articulating the fact, if I'm articulating accurate and confirmed facts about you, and that is tearing you down, then that has nothing to do with me. If you get on here and say, well, Brother Diallo does this, Brother Diallo believes that, Brother Diallo said this, and I come and say, instead of saying what you're saying is inaccurate, what you're saying is invalid because there's nothing to support it up, to prop up what you're saying, or what you're saying is a distortion of what I actually said, then that's all a valid response. But if you come and say, well, you shouldn't say this thing because it's negative, or you shouldn't say this thing because it tears down, that is not a valid counter argument. It is a fallacious counter argument. If you personally believe that there is any individual or any organization that is above critique, then you are a cult member. You are not a follower. You are not a member. You are a victim of cult indoctrination. No one and nothing is above critique. And if you personally believe that the Nation of Islam is this great force in the community, then the level of critique and examination should be directly proportional to someone's power and critique. I'm a relatively small person with a small voice and a small platform. But if I blew up and every time I went on social media or every time I stepped out my front door, I had a whole entourage and people looking at me, then I would welcome more aggressive and deeper examination of my thoughts and deeper examination of my actions. You know, because I do not seek to be a demagogue. I seek to be a servant of the people. I seek to make a positive contribution to my just aspiration. Anyone telling you that you should not critique something is seeking to manipulate and exploit you. And Absolutely. It's a bottom line. And it's a faith-based organization, and I have absolutely no faith in nothing. I need evidence.
And I think, as we both know, the late, great master teacher, Dr. Amos Wilson, in his seminal text, Blueprint for Black Power, talked about that when you start aligning yourself with liberation organizations that are really rooted in what bettering the lives of Black people, they should have no religious affiliation whatsoever. Particularly the person in charge should have no religious affiliation, since because what would happen is more often than not, the person would then use that as a way to manipulate the masses and gain the resources for themselves. I also can remember when I came into consciousness, of course, I, like many, had a very positive view of the Nation of Islam.
So did I.
And I had
some most honorable Elijah Muhammad, yes, very much so.
And I had some more seasoned brothers in the struggle tell me that that's first wave consciousness. That's first wave consciousness. And one of the things they brought up was the fact, and I did some actual investigation for myself and even had a phone conversation with a member of the Nation of Islam regarding their program to end want, right? They had this program where if you give a certain amount of money each week, or that leads to a month, and of course annually, that will end want in America, particularly for Black people. So I asked some questions about how the program worked. And the brother said, well, the money we give helps support and sustain this. It provides the capital for the businesses of the Nation of Islam. And so I said, okay, this makes sense to me. I said, so you are investing in the business. So I said, do you receive a quarterly, semi-annual, annual dividend from the profits of these businesses? He says, no, brother, that's not how it works. I said, so educate me. Tell me how it works. And what he stated to me was, what we're supposed to do is give this money to Farrakhan and believe that he's going to do the right thing with it. And I said, well, I have to be honest with you, brother. That is a program that doesn't help anyone except for Farrakhan. Right. And so once again, we talk about critical thinking. He even admitted that the reason why the program hasn't worked is just because the members have not had enough blind faith. So I think it's very important that when people say, why are you critiquing Nation of Islam? We have valid critiques, and Malcolm X gave some very strong, accurate critiques regarding Nation of Islam, their teachings, how many things that they were being taught, not only about Islam, because, you know, that's a bit debatable. Even John Henry Clark stated that he couldn't give them a Arab center of Islam. It had to be African-American center for it to catch on and strike a root. But also in terms of this history, the history that was ahistorical. He would actually just making things up. Bizarre tales from what the Twilight Zone was some of the things that he was articulating to them. And when Malcolm became educated, became a mentee of the late great master teacher, Dr. John Henry Clark, he understood and even spoke out about these things on national television interviews. But moving along, one thing you're also known for is your critique of Black celebrities. As we know, many years ago, Malcolm X stated that what? Celebrities are not leaders. And he gave an example of that when you look in other communities, the Jewish community, the Latino community, the Arab community, the Orient or Asian community, or even a white community, celebrities are leaders. And we know in this last presidential election cycle, we had President Biden sitting down and doing an interview with Cardi B. For crying out loud, Cardi B, the WAP singer, right? And so if you could touch on why you think it's so important for Black people to understand that celebrities are not leaders and why we should really disavow them in terms of any type of political or activist engagement.
Well, I don't like saying celebrities are not leaders because they are. I prefer to say that they shouldn't be leaders.
Okay, very good.
Because, I mean, this is the state of affairs that we have to operate on. They are leaders. They are the most influential people in our community, and not just in terms of fashion, where you would think they should in terms of fashion or style or aesthetics and music. They are political leaders. They are highly influential in politics. They are highly influential in the economics of the community. So they are leaders, but it is a zero-sum game. Now, there is a caveat because a celebrity is a very unique person, and often we confuse celebrity with entertainer, or we confuse celebrity with artist. There are many Black artists, many Black entertainers, many Black athletes who are not celebrities. And there are many athletes, musicians, artists, entertainers who are also scholars, who are also revolutionaries. I would have no problem with a person who makes their living through the creative arts, through chasing balls, engaging in the political process. I don't seek to deny an entertainer the ability to engage with the struggle, to support, contribute, or even take a leadership role in the struggle. But the celebrity is,
for example.
Arthur
Ashe, I think, would be a good example.
Yeah, I had an opportunity to meet Arthur Ashe in New York before he passed. But Arthur Ashe, Paul Robeson, and many, athletes actually have some ballot. But a celebrity is an individual who transcends the art that they create. They transcend. Celebrities are basically in the most simplistic way, they're Pied Pipers for the status quo. Celebrities are living embodiments of the highest aspiration of the dominant culture. Private jets, big houses, I got so many houses, I don't have to buy luggage. I go through 10 passports a year. Right now, the dominant culture is capitalistic, imperialistic, hyper-materialistic. So you can't be, no matter how talented you are, no matter how well you chase balls, Craig Hodges is a good example, or Colin Kaepernick is a more contemporary example. No matter how good you flow on the mic, Wise, Intelligent, and Poor Righteous Teachers, or Coup lead man Boots Riley, you are not famous, or you don't become a celebrity because you are the most talented or because you have any talent at all. We know many celebrities, you become a celebrity when you are either handpicked or you are able to audition and convince the dominant culture that you can be a living embodiment of the highest goals available to the peasants, to the peons. That's what celebrity goes all the way back to the Roman Empire and the gladiators. People would buy gladiator sweat and gladiator blood, and they would buy the gladiator hair and obsess over, because that's the highest to be praised, and to die for Caesar and to give your life for the entertainment. So celebrities are a very unique status, and you find celebrities where people even becoming aware, like, what talent does Kim Kardashian have? Right. You know, or even as your music starts to suck, these people just don't fall off. They put, like, even with Will Smith, I was talking to a brother of mine the other night, and we were talking about his movie. Do you know that King Richard lost over $20 million? It was a fucking flop. Now, all these people are like, oh, King Richard and Black Fathers and all that. Nobody went to see the goddamn movie. And they still gave him an Academy Award because of his celebrity status, not because of the quality of the movie, or the movie really was something, a cultural product. That movie will be forgotten and tossed. It's not even a memorable. There's nothing in terms of the cinematography. It's enough. And you notice that Will Smith has made a career of distorting the lives of Black figures. Remember that movie, The Pursuit of Happiness?
Yes.
That was another guy who was a piece of shit that Will Smith turned into a hero.
Yeah, I actually read his autobiography.
It's a piece of shit.
He talks about, well, I won't go that far, but I'm trying to be kind, right? But he talked about this in the part where he got arrested. It wasn't for parking tickets. It was for domestic violence. He was a piece of shit. He was a capitalist piece of shit. He was a capitalist pig. And that was so Will Smith, and the same thing. Listen, I think that the father of Serena and Venus Williams is a great coach. He was a horrible father. He abandoned over half a dozen children. You know, one of his kids was living in poverty and got gunned down in the streets of Compton. You know, I would not want to use him as a model for fatherhood. If I raise my kids or I engage with my family the way that he engaged with his family, the only difference between him and all these other brothers we tear down is that he had a really great gift for coaching tennis. And you can praise his tennis coaching abilities all you want. You can even mimic or try to replicate his tennis coaching abilities. But in terms of his fatherhood, you wouldn't want a father like that. And even the sisters started distancing themselves from him at a certain part in his career. You know, so let me ask you this. I take it you watched the movie.
Hell no, I didn't watch that shit.
Okay. So
I know the Venus and Serena story. I know that story. I came up in the 90s.
I'm asking is because some people argue that one of the reasons why the film didn't do well at the box office was because of what? The fact that it was about a Black man. And there were several feminists who came out and were against the fact that they were honoring and venerating their father. I mean, these are just things that did take place.
Let me tell you something about these radical feminists. They have no power and influence in Hollywood. If radical Black feminists had a voice in Hollywood and could sink a film, most of the films we love as brothers, with these men with ripping muscles, shooting machine guns and ripping off arms and beating their enemies to death with their arms, wouldn't exist. So let's not act like we love to blame everybody. Listen, if everybody who claims the feminists destroyed the movie went and saw the goddamn movie, it would have done numbers. Come on. We love to scapegoat. Hollywood. Hollywood.
I didn't see the movie myself.
Huh? You saw it?
I didn't see the movie myself.
Because the feminists told you not to.
No, I didn't see the movie simply because I typically don't go to movies, right? However,
you could get it on streaming. Did you stream it?
I do plan to watch it. I will say this, I'm not aware of the kind of father that he was.
I will gladly pay you Tuesday for a hamburger today. Okay. Get back at me after you take time to watch it, man. Shoot, I'd rather go watch A Princess Bride. Yeah, I said it. First of all, we love making enemies of people we think we can whoop. That's bullying. Will Smith is a bully. That's bullying. So you want to say, oh, these sisters denounced this movie. Do you know how many movies that the feminists have denounced that did hundreds of millions of dollars?
Absolutely.
You know how many times?
Birth of a Nation, they came out against that, and people still went to go see it.
Didn't nobody, yeah, but that movie didn't do numbers either. That movie was not that successful. Well,
but there was a reason why it wasn't that successful. It was because it was talking about Black people fighting back.
No, no, that movie was Christian propaganda.
It was, but the belief. I understand it. I watched the movie. I know it was Christian propaganda, but I also know that the bigger issue was the fact that people took umbrage with the fact that it was a story about slavery and about a slave revolt. Right? It was Christian propaganda, but when people think Nat Turner, they think of what? The revolt, the rebellion. Right? I mean, I've been saying. I mean, I know people who personally didn't want to go watch the film because, oh, we can't be supporting violence. This is what people were saying.
Name names. Who said that? Who said that?
But, I mean, people I knew. But I'm like, but you watch Die Hard, but no problem.
I don't know who those people. I never met a person who said they didn't want to see a movie because they're supporting violence. Who are these people you know that said they won't go see Birth of the Nation because of violence? Because you know what movie did big numbers about slave revolts? The Django.
This is true.
Django Unleashed showed a Black man take a fucking double-barrel shotgun and blow a white woman out of her boots. So, and everybody went to see that movie.
This is very true.
So obviously people are willing to go see movies.
About a slave revolt.
Huh?
But what I'm saying is the narrative around the movie
first of all,
about a slave revolt.
It was. The name of the movie is literally Unchained. The subtitle is Django Unchained.
I get it. I'm just saying the narrative.
That's the narrative.
The reality of two
Did you see
things.
Django? Did you see Django?
Yes, I saw that movie.
And that movie wasn't from beginning to end about a slave rebelling?
Yes. Listen, what I'm saying is, I'm not talking about the facts. I'm talking about the narrative, right? The narrative regarding the movie Birth of a Nation was about it was a slave revolt. The reality was
that a good movie?
The reality was Christian propaganda.
Yes. Was it a good movie?
No, I don't think it was a good movie. But
I mean, not in terms of message. I mean, in pure butt naked internal empty entertainment.
I don't think it was a good movie. Period.
Exactly, and that's why the movie failed. But because the dude can't say, "Man, I made a shitty movie. I'm gonna come back better. I'm gonna come do more better." They come back and say, and that was a mainstream movie. I don't like this fact that people are like, oh, Black women or these Black feminists are tearing down movies about powerful Black men. That's some bullshit.
No, it's not. No, it's not. These are things I see. These are tweets that were created. I'm not saying that they were effective. All I'm saying is that these things did happen.
Yeah, but they didn't have any impact. That's like me saying I shut down. I don't appreciate what Will Smith did. And I denounce what Will Smith did. And then Will Smith go make a movie and it flops like King Richard flopped. And people be like, Diallo destroyed Will Smith's movie. That's not some bullshit.
That's not what I'm saying.
You brought that up though. You brought that up.
But I'm speaking from my actual lived experience where there were people who told me that they weren't going to watch the movie because of these reasons.
Who are these people?
Black activists in the city I grew up in.
What are their names?
I'm not going to put their name out there.
You can't say what they said, because if I tell you somebody told me something, I'm going to tell you their name.
Because I'm not going to do that. I'm not going to do that to them. I'm not going to do that to those
individuals.
What are you
doing to them? These are powerful people who can stop Hollywood. These people, we should know who these people are. I want to follow them. If they're powerful enough to stop the machine of Hollywood.
No. I never said that.
The white propaganda apparatus, if they're powerful enough to stop a Hollywood vehicle from doing numbers that it was supposed to do, I think we should know who these people are because they're some of the most powerful people in our community. The Black Illuminati.
That's not what I said. What I said was there were people who came to me and said, I'm not watching the movie for these reasons. I never said they had any power to stop the movie from being successful. Those are two different things.
Okay. why is it relevant that some people didn't want to see the movie because of its violence? Like, my wife doesn't like violent movies or video games. If me and my sons are playing Mortal Kombat, she will leave the room, or we have to turn it off if she wants to come in and watch. She don't like it. Even when we were just watching some Star Wars movies, and sometimes she says it's too violent for me, or she covers her eyes up. You know, how is that relevant to the discussion about celebrity and the movie's success or failure?
Well, I think it's relevant to the fact. I think it's relevant to the fact that there is a current in our community of people thinking in this manner, and as a result, they're taking actions based on this thought.
There's a current in our community that they don't like violent media.
And the fact that there were people who were stating that they wouldn't watch the movie because it was about his daughters venerating a black man. I mean, I get tweets from people I don't even follow that show up on my. Can you name
those people? Can you name the people? Because I know there were some women who said, "Why are we making a movie?" But most of those people who said that, because most of us black folks, we've been watching those girls since they had the little beads in their hair, and they used to check every time. We've been with them since Compton.
Absolutely.
We've been watching them, and they have been a presence in our community and a presence in the black people's consciousness. There are white women who know nothing of Compton, who know nothing of, only thing they know about the Serena sisters and black people in tennis is Wimbledon and Forward. And they said some uninformed things that were, because if I see a movie about Sapanova, I don't know nothing about Sapanova's culture. I don't even, what's her name, Maria Sapanova? I don't know shit about her. So if I was arrogant enough or stupid enough to go tweet about her, I would probably say some inaccurate or incomplete bullshit about, I don't know how she became I don't know who trained her, I don't know nothing. So yes, white people, guess what? They are arrogant, they speak out of line, they speak out of turn, and most of those voices got shut down immediately. And most of those women crawled right back, allow me to finish, crawled right back into the caves they came from. And so they were dismissed. The people who said that bullshit, the only people who took them seriously are people who were trying to use their weak and dismissed voice and trying to act like it had more of an impact on the reception of the movie than it did. That's called nut picking. Nut picking is when you have a phenomenon or a situation in society, and you go and try to find the people that are on the fringes and bring them to the center. Like, there are some black people who want justice for African people, who want to liberate African people, who love African people and advocate for the interest of African people. Then you have some people who's like, we got to kill all whiteys. And so what they do is you have Black Lives Matter activists out here saying we want certain legislation platforms, we want certain policy reforms, we want certain resources to be given to our community, we want certain priorities within our local governments, and got real sane arguments. And Fox News will go get some crazy ass dude or somebody, well, Black Lives Matter is some weird shit, don't have no legitimate standing, and they'd be like, look what this guy said from Black Lives Matter. So if you go find some fringe woman saying, oh, it's inappropriate to give King Richard his props for his impact, those were not the dominant voices, and those voices were immediately shut down. They were immediately shut down, and they are irrelevant. The real relevant question and the real relevant position is all these hashtag goals, hashtag black excellent black people did not give that movie the support. Madea did a new movie that did better numbers. Madea do better numbers than any inspirational black movie. So we can't blame white feminists or even crazy fringe black feminists. Why bring them into the discussion? How are they relevant? That some black or white feminists or some feminists said some nonsense.
Are you going to be answered? As I stated, I work in higher education. There were people in my hometown that made these comments about why they didn't go see Birth of a Nation. And there were individuals, and I'm at Ohio State, the Ohio State University, third largest institution in the country.
They who cannot be named.
In which this was a popular current amongst many of the women that I came in contact with. Now, with that being said, I haven't seen the movie yet, right? So I can't speak on if it was good, bad, and I don't know. I don't even know much about Richard Williams because I can't speak on who he is because I haven't read up on him, which I will do. All I'm stating is that there were people making these comments, and that they were individuals that I had conversations with who said, this is why I'm not watching the film. There were people who said, there were people who came to me about why they wouldn't watch Black Panther. It still did well, right? So all I'm saying is that there were some people in our community that, and this was their viewpoint. I never said that they were responsible for why the film didn't do well.
These people who made absurdist claims about they don't like violence in movies, that's why they won't go see Birth of a Nation, or it centers a Black man and erases Black women in terms of King Richard's. What impact did they have on the performance of those movies at the box office or the reception of those movies by the masses of the people? What impact did they have?
I would say none.
So we can stop discussing it. So can we move on and stop discussing it?
The reason why I push back is because you said that the movie the cinematography was bad, but then you said you hadn't watched the movie.
No, I didn't say it was bad. I was giving that as an example. I'm pretty sure it was shitty. I'm pretty sure it was I know Birth of a Nation was some Christian propaganda. I know King Richard is some bootstrap Black capitalist, Black integrationist driver propaganda. I just know that because, you know, I live in that's the only thing Hollywood gonna put out.
Well, this is
even
true.
If they're telling a positive Black message, there's going to be a poison core. All of the positive Black positivity is a candy coating on a poison core. Same thing with Black Panther. But whether that's in every movie. And if you go into movies to be educated about who Black people are or what Black people should or shouldn't do, you a damn fool. Go there and get your empty entertainment and then return to reality.
Right. I remember when Selma came out, I told my ex-wife, I don't want my son to go see Selma. She said, why? I said, because it's gonna be ahistorical, it's gonna be propaganda, particularly in terms of the view of Malcolm X. She took him anyway and was like, man, you were right. They had Malcolm X just acting like he was running around being a demagogue that had no plan to just run around people up. So I said, I told you. All I'm saying is I can't give a critique of the movie until I watch it.
I can give a critique of a movie I haven't seen.
Right. Even though I know what Hollywood is about. I can give her critique.
I could give her critique of feces without tasting it. Because there are other elements you can look at. The aroma, you know, the texture. There's certain things. If you look at, there are other things, you know, I am a student of propaganda. I know the history and track record of Will Smith. I know the history and track record and agenda and value systems of Hollywood. So you don't have to see every goddamn movie that comes out in order. So, you know, but I'm not saying before I gave a written critique of it, before I gave like an official critique of it, I would definitely watch it, but ain't nobody got time for that. So I'm just telling you the things I'm asking you, see some of it. Like when you go see King Richard, you'll see. I call myself a secular prophet, because I make predictions about things, but my predictions are always based on the evidentiary record, the historical pattern, the trajectory of things. So if I see you throw a ball and I see how much force, I see the angle that you throw the ball, and I say the ball is going to land within this area, and then the ball lands in that area, it's not that I have a supernatural prediction ability, I just have other information that can lead me to reach a conclusion even before that conclusion is reached. That's all. That's what we all do. We all make those measurements.
Most intelligent people are able to do that. I tell people all the time I can predict the future, particularly with certain activist movements. I say if it's not grassroots, I'm going to tell you at the end of the day, this is what's going to happen, right? Fine. Only difference is I don't think that this is an apples comparison. But listen, we will put a pin in it because we got to conclude. And last but not least, you did a book review on your YouTube channel on Dr. Amos Wilson's book, if I can pull it out very quickly, Black on Black Violence, the Psychodynamics of Black Self-Annihilation in Service of White Domination. And you did a book on this, and just want to know if you could help give us your perspective on Black violence. I know there are numerous perspectives. I have my own perspective, and I may give that if we have time. But if you could give your view on Black self-annihilation in service of white domination.
Dr. Wilson focuses a lot on the what Carlos Cook would call what was his term for it? The lumpen, you know, the working class criminal. But ultimately, there's this delusion, especially with our peers, about RBG, revolutionary but gangster.
Right.
Farrakhan has promoted the fallacious idea that gangs and gangsters are our frontline soldiers. There's this delusion or illusion that the Black criminals and the Black gangs and the antisocial behavior is somehow in resistance to or rebellion to American culture, American law, American values. So the thing I think that Amos Wilson articulates and gives the data to support is that these criminal elements in our community are servants to and mimics of our oppressors.
Absolutely.
They are not being rebellious by breaking America's laws, because they're
actually, you could argue that they're following and doing what America wants them to do.
That's what he said. The Black on Black criminal is mimicking. The father of the Black on Black criminal is the white on Black criminal.
Right.
The Black on Black criminal has the same value systems, methodology, and ultimate goals of our enemies. And so we have a lot of ideas. You take, for example, somebody like Rick Ross, the real Rick Ross,
right?
Pre-Ray Ricky Ross. He was an agent of the CIA.
Come on now.
He facilitated biochemical warfare against the African people. And he came out of prison and he went on a nationwide tour that was heavily sold out audience of Black people. People look at him like he is some type of folk hero. He came to my old hometown of Kansas City, Missouri, that was ravaged by crack cocaine, ravaged. My own family has been ravaged by the so-called crack epidemic. And the people embraced him as a hero, as our true heroes, like formerly known as H. Rap Brown, rot in prison. You look at the most prominent musical artist of our time, Kanye West and Drake. They did a concert, Free Larry Hoover, while Mumia rots in jail, Sundiata Acoli rot in jail, while Pete O'Neill is in exile, while Assata Shakur is in exile. And at any given moment, thanks to Barack Obama's increasing the bounty on our head, you could have some Blackwater mercenaries sneak into Cuba and kidnap and assassinate her.
Assata Shakur, yeah.
Yes, but they're talking about Larry Hoover. And so
now, people don't know who is Larry Hoover for those who don't know.
He's the founders of the Gangster Disciples.
Right.
You had Snoop Dogg started an entire movement for free Tukey and to save Tukey. Tukey is literally a serial killer. If you follow the research of Baba Kidi Obiawadu, he said there's over 24 murders of Black people attributed to Tukey directly. But Tukey never faced any prosecution. He was never arrested. Tukey was arrested and sentenced to death for killing an Asian family. He never even answered for or acknowledged the Black people, even when he reformed himself and advocated for peace. Part of reformation is to confess to the people what you did. But you had free Tukey all over the place. When we have true revolutionaries, true guerrillas, true freedom fighters sitting on death row and rotting in prison, that they never speak up for.
I read Tukey's memoir, and I know that one of the things he said, I'm not going to comment because I can still face prosecution. The other was he went all the way up to that admitting, because the book is entitled Blue Age Black Redemption, and he talks about, listen, I was cuckoo for Cocoa Puffs, right? I was a nut. And he argued that he didn't commit the crime. He said, but I'm in here because of what I did do, but didn't get sentenced or caught for.
Right.
But as you stated, we have individuals who haven't done this type of harm to our community, but it's really irreparable, can't be repaired, and no one pays any attention to them. And so I think this is a good example when you talk about how these so-called celebrities play a role of trying to have us ingratiate ourselves and romanticize ourselves to people who have done harm to our community. And the same at the time, sometimes their music does harm.
Yes, to criminals. We have embraced the idea. Right now, one of the top Black shows, Black Mafia Family, BMF. I haven't seen it either, but I'm very familiar with the BMF, Black Mafia Family, their history, and I know it's a very popular show. And believe you me, I love crime thrillers. I love gangster shit in terms of fantasy and entertainment. But there is definitely a toxic trend of turning people who prey on our community into folk heroes.
This is very true, yes.
And neglecting the people who truly fought for us.
Absolutely.
A revolutionary but gangster. You cannot be a revolutionary gangster. And there is confusion because revolution is illegal. Revolutionaries are criminals. They go against the standard, the status quo. But the difference is revolutionaries have a collective political agenda, whereas criminals have an individualistic material agenda. Revolutionaries are worthy of our praise and support and remembrance and reverence. Criminals are not. So, you know, I'm not even making a moralist argument about this. I'm not even making a moralist argument. It is subversive. Huh?
Just stating facts.
Yes. Somebody got mad at me because they were like, I was like, well, Will Smith committed assault and battery. And they were like, oh, you care about the law? You're supposed to be a revolutionary. And I'm like, revolutionaries are more keenly aware of the law and legality than anyone else. The Black Panther Party was co-founded by a law student.
Absolutely. I had the same conversation. And the brother was like, well, you care about the law? He said, F the law. I said, okay, well, if that's your, and I said, first off, you're a father, you're a husband, and that's the mindset you have. So this is, you know, I'm worried about your family. But I said, if you really believe in F the law, I said, let's go rob a bank today.
Right.
I said, let's go commit a 187 on a cop right now. If it F the law, let's break it right now.
Right.
So I said, the reality of the situation is, I said, why was that so problematic? I said, because I did a video episode on it, but I talked about that. What it shows is that, once again, any problem, we're going to resort to criminal behavior. And I said, for the average person, the average Negro, you're going to be sitting in jail. You're going to lost your house, your job, your apartment, whatever you had, you're not going to get out, right? He could get off with that because it's his celebrity, and Chris Rock, he's kind of my friend, and I don't want to press charges and all this stuff. But in the real world, if police see you assault someone, they're not going to ask the person who was assaulted, do you want to press charges? They're just going to arrest you off GP. And you're going to be locked up. So part of this, we have to think intelligently. And here's the other thing I would say this, and I told people this, they said I had a little hateration in my game, but I said, this is the same guy who got in one little fight and moved with his auntie and uncle in Bel Air. The only time this dude even beat somebody up was when he was playing Muhammad Ali, right? And that, as a 50-some-year-old man, you should be able to solve a problem with a conversation. Let me talk to you offline. Right, and if it does lead to fisticuffs, which would be unfortunate for someone of that age, you do it offline when no one knows about it, not for the whole world to see. I said, you're not Bane in Dark Knight Rises, right? You ain't hanging people up for the world to see. And so I think that, once again, it sends a bad message to young Black men of how to resolve problems. Because the reality of the situation is, you know, someone puts a battery in your back, and what ends up happening is you end up behind bars.
Well, yeah, I agree with all of that. I think it's unfortunate. I definitely understand Black people. You know, one of my favorite television characters was Chalky White from Boardwalk Empire. Excellently written, reminded me of my great-grandfather and his mentality and disposition. So I liked Chalky White. He was a character, he was a criminal, but there's too much confusion with reality versus fantasy, fact versus fiction, real world impacts versus emotional inspiration. The Black on Black criminal is not an enemy of our oppressor. The Black on Black criminal is an asset of our oppressor. That's the bottom line. And that's what Dr. Wilson teaches.
I would even argue an ally.
No, he's not an ally, because allies negotiate. Allies both bring resources to the table and predetermine what will be extracted. Allies have obligation to each other. They're not, if they were allies, you could even say, well, they have real power. They set the agenda. They are assets. They are owned and controlled assets, not allies. That's why you notice when the CIA controls certain elements in foreign countries, they're very keen on defining what an ally and an asset is. You and I are allies. You know, these men, you elevate them too much when you call them allies of the oppressor. They are assets of the oppressor. They don't negotiate, they don't set the terms, they don't. And another thing that you need for allyship is written or understood within that alliance, that if either side fails to perform, there will be consequences, and the consequences are defined. So what consequences, what obligation does the systems and institutions of white hegemony and domination and capitalism face if they fail to live up to their obligations to the criminal element in our community? And what obligations that they are not allies? That is an extreme misunderstanding of their role and relationship within the larger economy and society and culture. They are assets of the oppressors, not allies.
Gotcha. So listen, we're about to wrap up. If you could once again let people know how to get in touch with you, and what message would you give to the masses of African people throughout the world who are fighting to restore ourselves to our traditional greatness, and how could they do that in a pragmatic, tangible way each and every day?
You can find me at Diallo Kenyatta across social media, on YouTube, Twitter, and all the other stuff. I'm not on TikTok. Everybody told me to get on TikTok. I don't know. Y'all see all this gray in my beard? I don't know what to do with that. But, you know, the traditional old school social media is at Diallo Kenyatta. You can subscribe to my YouTube. I also have a local radio broadcast, the Bro Diallo Show, that I'm getting back up. You know, it kind of fell off because of the pandemic and quarantine, and the radio station shut down. It's reopening and a slow reopening. So anyway, when it's safe and prudent, the Bro Diallo Show will be back broadcasting, but you can find archives of the Bro Diallo Radio Show on diallokenyatta.com, AfricanWorldOrder.com, if you want to support my efforts, my media infrastructure and apparatus. The message I would give to African everywhere in the world, yesterday was Gil Scott-Heron's birthday, and Gil Scott-Heron said, nobody can do everything, but everybody can do something. I would say, as an African, you work to make a positive contribution to the just aspirations of our people. That understanding is not limited by resources, education, and region. Make a positive contribution to the just aspirations of your people. And you can do something of that nature, even by educating yourself, like you said, working out, strengthening yourself, because you are a component of the African whole. So even as you better yourself and strengthen yourself, you are making a positive contribution. And then you use your time, talent, and resources to feed back into those actions that develop and cultivate us. Also actions that subvert the status quo, subvert capitalism, subvert white hegemony, subvert individualism and selfishness and greed. Our ultimate goal is Pan-African liberation. That means dismantling the infrastructure of the Western military apparatus, from NATO to their nuclear infrastructure. It means dismantling the apparatus of capitalism, capitalist control over the identification, extraction, processing, and refining of the world's natural resources. It is pretty clear. Avoid the manipulation where people say there is some type of supernatural element to this, whether it is prophecy. There is no prophecy. The world is not on a prophetic path. There is no supernatural group of magical lizard people and all that bullshit, because a lot of times when you come into consciousness, there is a lot of distraction. So stay rational, stay grounded, make sure your perspective is evidence-based and historically guided. And that's what you do. Become a revolutionary. There is no other expenditure of your life's, your limited time on this earth. There is no better way to make best use of your talent than to engage in your people's existential struggles and to advance your people's collective interest.
Wonderful, wonderful. And I want to thank you once again for taking the time out to do this once again. Went much better than last time. You gave me quite an education, even though we still differ on some particular perspectives. But it's great to have you, and I hope I could be on your show sometime in the future as well.
Anytime. This is your first time saying you're willing to come on.
God, I will make sure
A
I
lot
let
of
you know
stuff I
that.
need to talk about. I need to talk to you about how to get in shape. Sitting over there looking brolic. Can we, let me sit up.
I got you. And if you're on the viewers, make sure you like and subscribe, and make sure you follow Kenyatta's page as well. Until next time, peace.
Peace. Good night, y'all. Or good morning, wherever y'all at.